Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, on this Wednesday morning at 9:15 over here in Yerushalayim. What a beautiful day it is, and it's wonderful to be able to learn together with you Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers, Perek Bet, chapter 2, and we're going to start today learning Mishna Bet, Mishna 2. In fact, Mishna Bet and Mishna Gimel are connected, so we're going to try to learn both of them together. So please open your Sidur or your Mishnah for Pirkei Avot. And I want to thank very much Raya and Mordechai for broadcasting this shiur of Pirkei Avot, according to the teachings of Chassidut. Perek Bet, Mishnah Bet, chapter 2, Mishnah 2. The Mishnah says as follows. The first Mishnah was Rabbi, and we talked about Rabbi. When it just says Rabbi, it means Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. So this Mishnah is from Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's son, Rabban Gamliel, beno shel Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Omer. Rabban Gamliel, the son of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, says as follows: Yafeh Talmud Torah im derech eretz. The literal translation is that Talmud Torah, learning Torah, is nice, is beautiful with the way of the land. Soon we're going to see some interpretations, but basically it means work or having an occupation, and that keeps the world running. That's like the way of the land. That when both have an effort, when you have an effort in learning Torah, and you put in an effort in your work, whatever you do, mashkachat avon, it makes the sin be forgotten to the side. And your main focus is on learning Torah and on doing work. V'chol Torah she'ein imam malacha sofa b'tela v'goreret avon. And every learning Torah, every scenario of learning Torah, which does not have malacha, work with it, sofa b'tela, at the end it will be nullified, v'goreret avon, and it can cause sin. In other words, after learning the previous statement, that you need to have both Torah and derech eretz, Torah and work. So a person might say, you know what? If both of these, both Torah and the work, they keep me away from sin, so then maybe I should only learn Torah. It's always a good thing to only learn Torah, but a person might say, maybe I should only occupy myself with learning Torah. So therefore the Mishnah continues and says that any Torah that does not have any work with it, at the end will be nullified. In other words, if a person doesn't have a parnasa, some kind of livelihood, then God forbid they can come to a state where they will be stealing, God forbid, and not doing the way of the land, going away from the ways of Torah, the way we should be acting. So therefore, it's important to have a healthy balance between learning Torah and having an occupation and parnasa, a livelihood, a good balance. Let's move on to the next part of the Mishnah, and this is the bridge to Mishnah Gimel. V'chol ha'oskim im hatzibur, and anyone that is involved with the community, with the public, yiyu oskim imahem l'shem shamayim, should be involved with them l'shem shamayim, for the sake of Hashem. Just to mention that today is a very powerful day politically over here in Eretz Yisroel. First of all, a new president will be chosen in the next few hours, and also of course we don't speak politics, so I'm not going to say any names, but basically one of the coalition possibilities will be quite clear by midnight tonight. And so it's important to remember that we talk over here about whoever deals with Am Yisrael, and we're going to see in the next Mishnah about governing. And when we deal with government, when we deal with people that are very involved in helping out people on a public level, on a government level, it's important to remember that they have to be acting with us l'shem shamayim. That is a good example of of a person who is sincere in their service of Hashem, servicing many people, servicing the public. Because, let's continue now in the text, for when a person does act l'shem shamayim, when you're dealing with in public affairs, shezechut avotam mesayatam, that the zechut, the honor, the merit of their parents, whether it means literally or it means our forefathers and our patriarchs and matriarchs, mesayatam helps them out. V'tzidkatam, and their righteousness, omedet lad, is around forever. V'atem, and you, ma la'ani alechem sachar harbe ki'ilu asitem. Hashem says that even if it's very challenging to be able to do la'asok b'tzibur, public affairs, to help people to be focused in the right way, nevertheless, Hashem says, if I see that you're making a strong effort, then I give you the reward ki'ilu asitem, as if you've done it. Let's do the Bartanura, which has some very interesting interpretations over here for this Mishnah. In the beginning of the Mishnah, Rabban Gamliel said as follows, that learning Torah needs to be together with derech eretz, the way of the land. So he says, what's derech eretz? Work, malacha o schora. Why do both of these points of learning Torah and doing regular work, why do they weaken the sin? Because the Torah, when a person learns Torah properly, then it can simply make the energy of a person weaker, because you put yourself into it and you sweat. It's almost like running and exercise. Learning Torah, if you do it properly, it's called la'asok b'divrei Torah, to be totally immersed and involved in the learning of the Torah. And of course, work, that also makes a person weak. When you work hard, so it takes away a person's koach, a person's energy. So therefore, it's important that we have that both of these ideas of learning Torah and doing work, they both make the koach, the energy of a person, weaker, and then the person doesn't have koach to do a sin, to do sins. Now, when a person is involved with is osek tzibur, and he does public, he's involved with the community, and he helps people, it should be l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. And the Bartanura explains, v'lo kedei litol atara, not to have a crown, and not to have their own personal ego and pride. If a person is involved with public affairs, it should be a public servant, someone who serves the public, and it should be that's the view that it should be a zechut. It should be an honor to serve the public. If a person doesn't have that approach, and they're only into themselves, and they're only into their own personal benefit and pride, then really they should not be involved in public service. And then at the end of the Mishnah says, "Ve'atem, and you, ma'aleh ani alechem sachar harbe ki'ilu asitem." Even though it may not come, your deeds may not bring a total fruit. Nevertheless, Hashem says, I attribute the Yeshua, the salvation of Am Yisroel, to you for trying your best and for serving Am Yisroel sincerely. Another interpretation is that those people that are in the public service and they help the tzibur, they help the public, and they almost push people to do proper things, to give tzedakah, and to do other mitzvahs like redeeming those that are in captivity. According to this interpretation, the zechut avot of the people that you're helping, they will be a zechut for you. That's a beautiful interpretation. And here's the interpretation of the Rambam, which is quoted from the Bartanura, that if at the time that you are being involved with public affairs and you are helping people on all levels, helping people because you're helping people, you missed out on an opportunity of a mitzvah. You have the mitzvah and they have the reward. So it doesn't come to doing the mitzvah itself, but it definitely brings a person extra zechut, extra merit to be able to realize that yes, you're not far away from the mitzvah. You do have some part in the mitzvah itself. Here's a beautiful interpretation according to Chassidut from Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev. I have the zchut of having his name, Yisroel Levi Yitzchak, and this is in the name of the Baal Shem Tov. In the beginning of the Mishnah, when the Mishnah says, Kol Torah she'ein ima melacha, any Torah that does not have any work, so to speak, any occupation, is sofa b'tela, at the end will be nullified. So what does the Baal Shem Tov say? What is melacha? Melacha refers to ahavat Yisrael, loving of a fellow Jew. And even when you learn Torah, it's not enough. It's not enough if you don't. It's not enough if you don't put yourself into it. If you put yourself into it and you invest in the melacha of ahavat Yisrael, then you know that it's going to be that your Torah will be sustained. But if you don't put yourself into the ahavat Yisrael, so you just have Torah, but the melacha, the quote unquote work, the occupation of ahavat Yisrael is not taken too seriously, then chalila sofa lebatel, it can be at the end, it can be nullified. So in other words, what the Baal Shem Tov is saying is as follows: you have two ways of doing ahavat Yisrael. You can either do ahavat Yisrael, by the way, you're doing other stuff, or as I have a friend that once referred to doing things by the way, he said, pass the ketchup. Like, just I'm doing this. I'm buying some stuff in the store. So how many potatoes do you want? It's not like something that you put yourself into. But if it's a malacha, if it's an occupation, something that you believe in, something that you like Aaron HaKohen, we learned in the previous chapter, not only Ohev Shalom, that he loved peace, but Rodef Shalom, he pursued peace. He looked for an opportunity to do shalom. If you have that approach, then that's called melacha. That's called an occupation. Ahavat Yisrael is not just by the way, pass the ketchup, but Ahavat Yisrael is something that you with your whole heart and soul you believe in, and then it has an entirely different strength and seriousness. Now let's move on to Mishnah Gimel. At the second half of Mishnah Bet, we talked about people that are in the public service and how they have to be serving their constituents b'yirat shamayim, with fear of Hashem. And so now the Mishnah says, Hevo zehirun barashut. One should be very cautious with government. Does that sound familiar? One should be very cautious with government. Why? She'ein mikarvin lo la'adam, because they do not show themselves to be close to a person, ela litzorech atzman, only for their own purpose, only for their own benefit. Sometimes they show you as if they're close to you, but it's only from their own benefit that they're going to get from it. Nir'in ke'ohavin b'shat hanatan. They seem like they're your friends when they themselves have pleasure. However, ve'enom din lo la'adam b'shat hachako. They do not stand by the person when you really need them and you're really pressed for help. Enom din lo la'adam. They do not stand by your side when you really need them. So be cautious. It doesn't say that you shouldn't have anything to do with them. On the contrary, you should definitely build connections, try to help other people, Try your best on your own level. But that's only, just remember, that that's only for their own benefit. When you are going to really need them, not so sure if they're going to be, it's very possible that they might not want to be part of the solution and helping you. So now let's see what the Bar Tanura says in this Mishnah. Hevu zihirin barashut. You people that are involved in the public service, even though that you need to be involved, you need the government, you need those individuals, you need people in power in order to get you certain connections in order to accomplish major things. Be careful, be cautious. Now the Rebbe has a very beautiful interpretation over here. When we talk about Rishut, government, this is on a Hasidic level. So number one, the Rebbe says that when you're talking about dealing with government, sorry about that. Number one, the Rebbe says that even though when we talk about in the previous parak, in the previous chapter, we talked about al titzvadal rashut, it's not good to be connected to government. Nevertheless, there are people who are community activists, and those people need, by the very nature of their position, in order to help people, they need to get involved with government. They need to meet people. So, therefore, the Mishnah says it's okay. As long as you're focused l'shem shamayim, it's not a bad thing. The government is not a G word that you're not allowed to say. As long as you're focused and you're able to have proper yirat shamayim, fear of heaven, then you know that you're okay. Now we know that Pirkei Avot is mili de chasiduta, is words of chasidut, of lifnim mishurat adin, beyond the letter of the law. What does this subject of having to do with government have to do with Torah in general, or with serving Hashem beyond the letter of the law? It doesn't even seem to have a connection with Pirkei Avot in general. So what could be the reason why this Mishnah, or the deeper interpretation into this Mishnah? Moreover, this Mishnah happens to be related to a small number of people. Most people aren't necessarily community activists, and this the instruction of how to deal with government doesn't apply to very many people. So, what could be the message for you and I when we learn this Mishnah? So the Rebbe has a nice interpretation into the word reshut, government. What is the concept of the reshut according to the Kabbalah? So when we talk about government, one moment please. You know, the human being is a small world. Whatever you have in the big world, in the macro, you also have in the small world, man. It's called Olam Katan Ze Adam. A man is like a small world. So within ourselves, we also have a reshut. We also have a government. We have a government which guides us, leads us, and is able to give us instructions on how we should run our lives, both according to Torah and mitzvot, and also in general. So, when it comes to government, we have to be very careful. That's what the Mishnah says. Hevu zihirin barashut. You need to be careful with the government. What does that mean? What's the government that we have to be careful with? So this is the interpretation. We talk about governing over a person's body. So it's the Yetzer. We have, the Alter Rebbe says in the Tanya, there are two parties, if you will, in the government, which are trying to take control. Wow, how relevant this is. There are two approaches, and each one is trying to take full control. The Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, he's like a little sheep, a little goat, a little pussycat. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is like a lion, is like almost like a king. He acts like he wants to take over, and he wants to take full control. So we have to be very, very careful, and we want to see who is doing l'shem shamayim. Obviously, the Yetzer Tov, the good inclination, has in mind for the sake of Hashem. But then when we have the Yetzer Hara, that's obviously not l'shem shamayim. Here's the catch. What does the Yetzer Hara come and say? The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, does not come along one day and say, do avodah zarah, God forbid, serve idols, because he knows that no normal God-fearing person will even enter their mind. So what does he do? He says, first day he says, do something small, relatively speaking minor. It's not that bad. Or it doesn't matter, no one's looking. That is the beginning. Then the next day he says, do another thing. And the next week he says another thing. Until, God forbid, he could bring someone to violate the worst sins possible. This is why the Mishnah tells us. The one who's the lion who tries to overtake the bully, be very careful with him. Why? She'ein mikarvin lo la'adam ela bishat hanatan. When do they show closeness to you? Only when they have pleasure. When the Yetzer Hara has pleasure, when the body thinks they're having pleasure by doing one sin or another sin, so they're getting close to the government, they're getting close to those in power, and they think they're having pleasure. But really, this is such a beautiful interpretation, but really, it's only a temporary pleasure. It's not a real pleasure. The real pleasure is Torah and mitzvot. That's the eternal pleasure. What's the proof? The punchline of the Mishnah, right? The last line of the Mishnah. Ve'enom din lo la'adam b'shat dachako. Excuse me. When you really need them, they're not going to be there for you. You're going to have to knock on a different door, the door of the Yetzer Tov, and he'll be there for you. The good inclination, the neshama. He is the one that you should put your hope into, your effort into. And so, in summary of what we learned today, 2 points. The first point we learned about learning Torah and also balancing that with work and your occupation, to be able to have a parnasa and to be able to give lots of tzedakah, and that they're both important, the healthy balance. And then the second point we learned about is the idea of those people that are community activists and working in the public eye for the community. It's so important that they should remind themselves at every moment of the day that they're public servants, they're working for everybody, and they should be working l'shem shamayim for the sake of Hashem. Therefore, your connection with the government should be minimal. If you need them to help you, realize that it's not always pure. So we have to pray for our governments, that our governments and our leaders should be more inclined and more in tune to serve Am Yisrael as messengers of Hashem. And when if they have yirat shamayim, fear of God, in front of their minds all the time, then we can rest assured that the decisions that they'll make will hopefully be along those lines as well as yirat shamayim and serving Hashem. Thank you very much for joining us as we learned these two Mishnas, Mishnah Bet and Gimel, and we look forward to seeing you, Bezrat Hashem, tomorrow morning, Halavai, at 9:15. Remember the new time, 9:15, Bezrat Hashem. And, of course, Friday morning, Kabbalah Cafe for Parshat Shlach. Shabbat, we're looking forward to seeing everybody over here. The Bet Midrash has been amazing. Baruch Hashem, Sunday and Tuesday. Today, from 12 to 2, there's going to be a Bet Midrashiyah for women with my wife, Shashi, and also with Mrs. Devorah Leah Ashkenazi. You don't want to miss this Midrashiyah, so women, please join us, spread the word, and we're going to send out the flyer very, very soon. All the best. Shalom, shalom, and have a wonderful day.